This guy is pursuing an incredibly alluring woman with a voluptuous body and captivating appearance. Seeing her fall asleep on the couch, he carries her to the bed. However, maintaining his integrity as an upright man, he doesn't take advantage of the situation. Then, after spending a lot of time together, feelings develop. The woman, feeling vulnerable, initiates a kiss with him. In the hotel corridor, they act as if no one else is around, passionately embracing each other. But it was all a premeditated conspiracy. To find out who the prey is, watch the entire video. This man is breaking into a museum. His accomplice is a woman named Vera. Even while sitting in one place, Vera can handle all the security issues. She sends seductive photos to the security guard, along with flirtatious messages to distract him. Then she hacks into the camera system, swapping images to help her partner move around the museum with ease. Everything else becomes very simple. It doesn't take long before the thief secures the painting. The next morning, two police detectives, Omer and Alan, are dispatched to the scene. After assessing the situation, they leave the museum to discuss in the park. Alan wonders why, among countless valuable items, the thief only took one painting. Perhaps he is after the content within it. Back at the office, Alan immediately begins her analysis. She realizes that the stolen paintings all relate to the theme of love. They belong to underrated artists. After a day of hard work, Alan predicts the thief's next target. She presents her theory to her boss to request additional support. However, he refuses because everything is still too vague. If she's wrong, Alan will bear significant responsibility. Therefore, she and Omer have to manage on their own. They arrive at the museum a day before the auction. Alan shows her police badge and requests the staff to take her to the painting. At that moment, the alarm sounded. In the chaotic crowd, the painting disappeared. Alan saw a suspicious individual on the lower floor. She immediately drew her gun, cocked it, and pursued the target. But when she saw his face, Alan stood there, stunned. Because it was her billionaire ex-boyfriend, Ayrd. In her emotional state, she let the target escape. Returning to the museum, she requested the security camera footage. There was no mistake. The person admiring the painting was indeed Ayrd. She printed the photo to report to her superior. However, he believed that Alan was mistaken. With Ayrd's wealth, he could buy thousands of such paintings. Why would he bother stealing one? One photo doesn't prove anything. Her superior asked Alan to continue investigating, while reminding her not to let personal feelings affect her work. It turns out the relationship between Alan and Ayrd is quite complicated. Omer knows about it too. It was because of Ayrd that Alan joined the police force. Knowing that her colleague was investigating her, Alan became angry. She asserted that she no longer held any grudge against him. After all, many years had passed. When Alan was abandoned by Ayrd, she was just a university student. Therefore, there's no way for Ayrd to know she became a police officer. Alan had a bold plan. She would pretend to rekindle her old relationship with Ayrd, waiting for an opportunity to catch him red-handed. Thinking that Alan was just joking, but unexpectedly, she actually did it. Alan appeared in front of Ayrd naturally. He was emotional upon seeing his ex-lover, quietly following her. Then he approached her. Hearing his call, Alan gently smiled. But when she turned around, she immediately reproached him. "You left without a word back then." Alan called Ayrd by the name, Ganner, while he was trying to explain the past. Just then, a man interrupted. He introduced Erlen as the new manager of the art gallery, an industry veteran who had just moved from Paris. Feeling that this encounter was sufficient, Erlen said goodbye and left. Sure enough, the next morning, Ganner came to the hotel to find his old flame. He earnestly invited Erlen to dinner to explain the past. Erlen pretended to agree reluctantly, but as she turned away, she smiled. In the late afternoon, they met at a lakeside restaurant. Before taking a bite, Ganner was already explaining non-stop. Back then, he was scared, so he ran away. Whether true or not, Erlen's eyes welled up with tears. She blamed Ganner for staging his disappearance for 6 months. That was the worst time Erlen ever had. She didn't want to eat, didn't want to sleep, always in a daze. Ganner expressed regret, apologized to Erlen, and begged her to give him another chance. Erlen seemed moved and agreed on one condition. From now on, in any situation, Ganner must tell her the truth. It seems that Erlen still has feelings for Ganner. Evidence is that as soon as she returned to her room, she reminisced about a happy moment with him. However, work remained Erlen's top priority. She asked Ozan to help her find information about Vera, the female hacker who had worked closely with Ganner in many missions. That night, Erlen broke into Vera's office. While she was snooping around, she was caught red-handed. A gun was pointed at her head, but Erlen was unafraid. She pretended to comply with the other's demands, then suddenly knocked the gun away. Even though she was just a hacker, Vera's combat skills were quite good. She fought back evenly with Erlin. There was even a moment when Vera had the upper hand, pinning Erlin onto the table. After landing a few punches to her opponent's face, she proceeded to remove the mask. But Erlin reached for the ashtray, turned the tables, and quickly counterattacked. Vera quickly fled. She informed Gunnar about what had just happened. She guessed that the intruder was from the police. However, Gunnar thought it was simply a petty thief. Because if it were the police, they would search openly. From the documents obtained, Erlin learned the location of the next theft. When Gunnar said he was going on a 2-day business trip, she immediately offered to go with him. Not wanting to refuse, he nodded in agreement. Erlin happily raised her glass in celebration. She pretended to be drunk and fell asleep on the couch so that Gunnar would carry her to bed, waiting until he was sound asleep. She quietly went downstairs to look for evidence. After searching for a while, Erlin opened a cabinet. But inside was a photo of herself. Moved, Erlin remembered the past and paused her investigation. The next morning, Erlin stood pensively watching Gunnar exercise. She suddenly felt a strange excitement in her heart. Gunnar also showed utmost care for his lover. He asked if Erlin slept well last night, and reminded her that the plane would take off in 2 hours. Erlin complained that she needed to return to the hotel, to shower and change clothes. She forgot that her boyfriend was a billionaire. He called for the staff to bring out an array of designer clothes. Then they headed together to the private jet hangar. Erlin was quite surprised by Bella's appearance. Although uncomfortable, Bella warmly shook hands. Upon arriving at the hotel, Gunnar led Erlin to a private room. He said they would only share a bed when she allowed it. Erlin was touched by how much he respected her. She moved closer, kissed Gunnar, and thanked him. As for Vera, she began to suspect that Erlin had issues. She shared her suspicions with Omer. Hearing this, Omer thought they couldn't just look at her eyes, and conclude that Erlin was the one who broke into the warehouse. He also warned Vera not to tell Gunnar, lest unforeseen consequences occur. Since the work wasn't urgent, Gunnar invited Erlin to go out. Seeing someone bring over a supercar, Erlin was extremely excited. She grabbed the keys and immediately sat in the driver's seat. They spent the whole day cruising around the city. At times, Erlin completely let go of her mission. She truly enjoyed the feeling of being Gunnar's girlfriend. Unable to contact his female colleague, Ozan went to her hotel room. Erlin was extremely angry at this dangerous action. However, Ozan didn't care. Instead, he reminded Erlin not to be soft-hearted. He had to persuade the boss for a long time to let them continue the investigation. If they couldn't prove that Gunnar was the culprit, the entire team could be fired. That evening, Gunnar booked the entire theater. He wanted to fulfill the promise he couldn't keep in the past. Erlin was truly happy. She felt Gunnar's sincerity. He still remembered things she didn't even pay attention to. Step by step, Gunnar was trying to regain his lover's trust. And that very day, Erlin's heart was swayed. Upon reaching the room's door, she passionately kissed Gunnar. They embraced each other, preparing to relive the sweet feelings of when they first fell in love. But just as Gunnar was taking off his shirt, Erlin stopped. She said it was too fast and that she wasn't ready yet. After apologizing, Erlin went back to her room and closed the door, leaving Gunnar standing there with a bewildered expression. Early the next morning, Gunnar announced he had an important meeting. Erlin expressed a desire to accompany him but was politely refused. He said he had arranged for a driver to take Erlin around the city. Knowing that Gunnar's team was starting to act, Erlin called Ozan to inform him. She quickly changed clothes to join her male colleague in tailing her boyfriend. However, Gunnar had prepared in advance. He arranged for 2 people dressed like him to create a diversion. When the alarm sounded, the painting had disappeared. Erlin stood in the middle of the room, observing all around. And upon seeing Gunnar in black attire, she immediately gave chase. He got on a motorcycle and left the scene. Erlin hurriedly ran to her car and pursued closely. The chase was extremely intense. Having studied the terrain beforehand, Gunnar drove into a narrow alley. Erlin helplessly watched as the target faded from view. This failure made Erlin extremely angry. Regardless of whether her boss approved or not, she was determined to put Gunnar behind bars. No matter how Ozan tried to dissuade her, it was futile. In the end, he agreed to continue the case with Erlin. The next day, Gunnar took Erlin to a party of the super rich. The host was named Valen, a successful businessman who knew how to spend money. He was preparing to sell his company to Gunnar so he could go enjoy the company of young women. Just like a lecherous old man. As soon as he saw Erlin, he swallowed hard. Gunnar had to interrupt as a warning. Acting somewhat oddly, Valen danced while leading the couple to the exhibition room. At the security door, he signaled for both of them to turn away while he entered the code. The room was deep underground. With a densely arranged camera system, Valen confidently asserted that this place was safer than a bank. 7 or 8 sensor cameras operated day and night with no blind spots. The steel door, made in Switzerland from titanium, was 30 centimeters thick. Only Valen could open the final door by answering 3 questions and facial recognition. Inside, it was divided into many small rooms, each displaying artworks with different valuation levels. After the visit, Gunnar decided to steal some paintings from Valen. Omer vehemently opposed this idea upon hearing it, saying it would be harder than reaching the sky. However, Gunnar had made up his mind. He always believed that nothing is impossible. Erlen also guessed Gunnar's intention. However, she didn't know the exact time and date. Meanwhile, Gunnar was discussing with his team. They planned to attach a recording device to the security guard's uniform in the laundry room to capture Valen's voice. As for his face, they would use 3D imaging. This part would be handled by a Japanese company. Gunnar executed the heist during Valen's next party. While he was working on opening the door, Valen, as usual, brought some girls down to show off. Bella immediately warned Gunnar to exit the tunnel. However, he succeeded at the last minute. The danger wasn't over as Valen intended to open the next room. Suddenly, a bodyguard approached and whispered to him. After hearing, Valen hurriedly left. Gunnar flashed a triumphant smile and proceeded to take the painting. Meanwhile, Bella still didn't understand what had happened and thought he was lucky. It turned out Erlen had climbed over the fence into the party and was caught by the bodyguards. At this point, she had to show her police badge to reveal her identity. However, Valen didn't believe that Gunnar would dare to steal from him. Instead, he suspected she was after the stolen artworks being displayed below. An alert sounded on his phone, and Valen realized the issue. But when he got down there, it was already too late. Only the frame remained on the wall. Furious, Valen returned and demanded the female police officer give him a name. Luckily, Ozan arrived with his team just in time to rescue her. Not wanting additional trouble, Valen agreed to release her unconditionally. On the way back, Ozan warned his colleague about Valen's danger. He's a kingpin involved in almost all areas of the underworld. Contract killings, assassinations, making people disappear routinely. If she wants to stay alive, it's best not to get involved. But Valen wouldn't let this matter rest easily. The next morning, Erlen woke up to find him sitting squarely in the middle of her room. With just a few questions, he had identified Gunnar as the culprit. Knowing her ex was in danger, Erlen hurried to warn Gunnar. Just as she entered the hotel, Valen arrived with his men. Gunnar knew everything through the security cameras. He was just waiting for his ex-lover to come in to tell her the whole truth. It turns out that Gunnar hadn't run away but was arrested during a robbery. Even though he was imprisoned for 6 months, he used money to suppress the media. Gunnar intended to tell Erlen, but she disappeared. Over the years, Gunnar tirelessly searched for her whereabouts. When he found out Erlen was an agent, Gunnar was extremely confused. He understood that if he told the truth, it would be hard to get back with her. Therefore, he planned to have her chase him, so that Erlen would fall in love with him again even knowing he was a thief. Putting that aside, Erlen told Gunnar to leave here with her. Contrary to her worries, Gunnar was very calm. He took his ex-girlfriend onto a helicopter to leave the building. Their destination was the place where the paintings were hidden. Erlen felt confused because the house wasn't even locked. It didn't make sense that Gunnar stole just for fun. Sipping a glass of wine, Gunnar began to explain himself in detail. He inherited his passion for art from his grandfather. Although his grandfather was a talented painter, his works were not highly regarded. Until his death, he was still tormented by that. But that was only one of the reasons Gunnar became a thief. The first time he met Erlen at an art gallery, she mentioned that the Mona Lisa was very famous. But that only happened after it was stolen. Back then, Gunnar was impulsive, and Erlen's words inspired him to become a thief. As Gunnar was earnestly explaining, some smoke bombs were thrown into the house. Erlen panicked and pulled her ex-lover to run. In a life-threatening situation, Gunnar was still joking around, constantly asking, "Do you still love me?" Annoyed, Erlen said nothing. She just grabbed Gunnar's hand and ran blindly until they realized they were at a dead end. Valen and his men quickly caught up. With no other choice, Erlen had to raise her hands in surrender. As for Gunnar, he was still teasing, because he knew that Ozan had set up an ambush here earlier. It turns out that on the day he stole the painting, Gunnar had obtained a lot of incriminating evidence against Valen. He gave it to Ozan in exchange for clearing his own crimes. Having captured the man he'd been hunting for nearly 10 years, Ozan paid no attention to the thief. He left, leaving Erlen to decide Gunnar's fate herself. So the billionaire's plan succeeded. Instead of reading an arrest warrant, Erlen confessed her feelings. And that was the final twist of the movie. That's it for today. See you all in the next video. Don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to the channel.